accept that. Yeah. Regal is a problem. Welcome back, and I want to say thank you because I have over 100 subscribers, and I'm pretty sure that means that some of you are people I don't know, so that's really strange, and thank you, because that's also kind of cool. Yeah, so if you're a returner, thank you so much, and if you're new, hi, I'm Derri, and yeah, I've read lots of stuff before. I had a stroke many years ago, and it coincided with depression, and it basically meant that reading anything of any substantive kind of chunkiness was a bit beyond me. So I reread stuff I was already familiar with. So that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about stories that I'm super familiar with. One of them is Realm of the Elderlings, and at the moment I'm also discussing Discworld. There's a few more, and I'll get to them eventually. For now, we're in Realm of the Elderlings. So, last time we talked about Assassin's Apprentice, which obviously means that this time we're going to talk about Royal Assassin, Book 2 in the Farseer Trilogy. It picks up pretty much at the end of Assassin's Apprentice. Fitz has succeeded in his most important mission to date, and he has only just got through it with his life intact. He does have some health issues to overcome because of the effects of the previous book, and I'm going to do my best to keep going without spoilers. Wish me luck. Okay. Currently, at the opening of the book, Fitz is still in the mountains. He isn't well. He has been left behind by the travelling. There's a word. Cortege? Is that the word? I don't know. I'll check. And it's basically just him and Burrick that have been left behind while Fitz recovers. During his recovery, he has a skill event, and discovers that one of his childhood friends from the town, who didn't know who he was and merely called him New Boy, has been caught up in one of the coastal raids that the Six Duchies are still dealing with. And he's not sure if she has survived, he's not sure if she needs help. He's just a 15-year-old boy who urgently wants to know what's happened to this young woman he has a crush on. So when he returns to Buckkeep, that's pretty much the most important thing on his mind, because he's 15. The other thing to note here is Assassin's Apprentice was an oddly kind of passive book. Fitz was a child. I mean, he was 6 at the beginning of that book, and he wasn't really in a position to make his own calls as to what he was going to do, what choices he was going to make. So now that he's older in Royal Assassin, you would think he would have more agency. Well, he kind of doesn't. Because he's got older, the people in charge of him have tightened those controls on him because they need him to be under their control. And he's a young man now and more likely to fly off the handle and go and do things that are perhaps ill-considered, which is valid. So, he's still keeping lots of secrets from lots of people. He's still very divided in his loyalties, and because this is Robin Hobb, there are plenty of flies in this particular pot of jam. One of them is Regal. Now, after the events in the last book. Many more people are aware of how far Regal will go, but they're not the people in charge. They're not the people who have the power to control Regal. And what this means is his behaviour is swept under the rug, and we're going to pretend that that didn't happen, and we're all going to go on like that didn't happen and accept that. Yeah, that's tricky. The events in Royal Assassin we get to see in slightly greater depth than we did in Assassin's Apprentice, because in Assassin's Apprentice, while Fitz saw what was happening, he didn't really grasp what was happening. And that's not to say that he does now. He's a fairly straightforward thinker. He's not good at complex and nuanced. He kind of relies on shade for that. But he is old enough to at least register when things are going on. So he's paying more attention, and that means we're better informed about what's going on. Again, he's not, well, I'm not going to say he's an unreliable narrator, because he's actually not that bad, I don't think. I could be wrong. What he is a shallow narrator, in that he often doesn't see beyond the obvious. So it's on you as the reader to see if you can tell which way the court currents are running. And there's a lot. While Fitz was recovering in the mountains, Kettricken has joined the Six Duchies as the prince's wife, and things are not going perfectly smoothly there. She's arrived at the castle with everyone that travelled with her, but in the mountain way, they've left and gone home, and she's there on her own. She has no court of ladies around her. She's got no ladies in waiting, no ladies in waiting, no maidservants, no staff at all. She's literally alone. So this makes her very vulnerable to a lot of courtly intrigues that she doesn't have any background on. So to ensure she doesn't misstep too badly, Fitz is sort of assigned to her to sort of keep her from making too many mistakes, and to try and educate her on the way the court works, because it's very, very different to the situation she grew up in. We would call her a princess. She's the daughter of the ruling person, but in the mountains they're seen in a very different way. They're seen and called the sacrifice, in that they have nothing. Their only responsibility is to do what needs doing for their people. Across the board, whatever needs doing, they will do it. And so she's been brought up in a very, I'm not going to say clear court, because there's intrigues wherever you go, but the way the intrigues happen in the mountains is very different to the way they do at Buckkeep. And she's not good at navigating these currents, because she's not a she's not simple. She's a very intelligent woman. She just doesn't think that way. She doesn't have convoluted thinking. She's very straightforward. She's very honest. And Shade and Fitz, because Fitz is the conduit, is trying his best to educate Kettricken, to groom Kettricken, to give her the information that she needs to benefit the crown in her role as Queen in Waiting, because she's married to the King in Waiting. And she goes about it in a different way than anybody there expects. She doesn't try and lose her honesty. She doesn't try and learn how to navigate tricky waters. She's instead decided that I'm not going to be false to myself. I'm going to be honest, I'm going to be loyal, I'm going to be who I am, and we all just have to learn how to navigate that together. And that for me is one of the magic things with Royal Assassin, because you do see that conflict of culture, that conflict of the way people expect people to behave. And that makes for some really interesting moments where Ketrican's assumption lead her to a certain set of behaviours, and the court making decisions affects how Ketrican feels because she doesn't really grasp the motivations behind them. And Fitz is trying really hard to there's a word, translate. He's trying really hard to translate the language of the court for Ketrican, and trying to sort of mould her behaviours into things the court can see to be acceptable. And so their relationship is quite a great one to read. Verity has had a wife arrive, a wife he didn't court, a wife he didn't particularly want, and is kind of treating her accordingly. And as per the nature of his name, Verity, he's incredibly truthful. He's very honest. He doesn't pretend. There's no false mask on anything. So she knows she's not wanted, and that's very hurtful for her. And Verity's not trying to be cruel. He's just like, look, I don't have time for this. I told you I didn't have time for this. I don't have time for this. So he's busy doing his thing. Regal is moustache twirling his way into as many facets of Fitz's life as he can, because he is so insanely jealous of things I don't think he can even put into words around Fitz, and the relationship that Fitz has with Verity, and the relationship that Fitz has with the king, and the fact that Fitz is beyond him now, and he doesn't like it at all, and his cruelty really starts to become apparent in the ways that he uses to come at Fitz. As the story progresses, the Fool, who I've yet to mention, has decided in his way that Fitz should look into the Elderlings, that the Elderlings that are part of the overarching saga's title perhaps aren't very well understood. And they're not. They're figures of myth, of legend. So when the Fool asks him to look into Elderlings, he adds it to the list of the many things that he really has as demands on his time. And then Verity asks him to do the same. So you've got two very different people asking him to look into the Elderlings for what seem to be very different reasons, but ultimately will lead to the same outcome. Ultimately, that outcome is the legend of the Elderlings, is that should the kingdom ever be in need, they will return and assist them in succeeding over whatever the problem is. And things have become so bad with the coastal raids that it's not really raids anymore, it's a war. And they're losing badly, and they need help. So Verity's looking outside the box for help. The Fool is offering an outside the box piece of suggestion for this is a good place to look for help. And as it turns out, Ketrican has some knowledge. So that's all very lovely. The increased attacks on the border has meant that there's an increased number of forged ones. The forged ones we encountered in the first book, and they are people who, they're not zombies. They're capable of thought, of problem solving, of They bleed, their hearts beat, they're alive, but they have no sense of community. They have no sense that they are part of a family, a town, a village. They have no sense that they are part of a greater whole. This causes problems because it means that if they're hungry, they'll eat whatever's there, regardless of whose food it is, how much of it was being saved for winter, or that perhaps they shouldn't have killed and eaten that horse because they might need it to ride tomorrow. That they have no sense of a greater existence around them. That they're utterly isolated. They're a problem. So that's been increasing because of the number of raids on the coast, and it's starting to really impact the economy of the Six Duchies. That in turn is causing problems for the dukes. There are 6 duchies in the 6 duchies. 4 of them are coastal and 2 of them are inland. And the 2 inland dukes are getting really shirty about being taxed to pay for soldiers, ships, provisions, stuff for the coastline. So there's a rift developing among the dukes. That is all bubbling away, just bubbling away. And the king is really ill. So everybody's getting a bit worried because everything's a bit unsettled. Everybody's very unsure of what's happening. And Fitz is 15 while he is training to be on the defensive ships that are being built, and while he is training in his skill, and while he is working with shade to deal with forged ones, and all of these demands on his time, and he's trying to keep all of these portions of his life separate. And because he's 15, 16, he can, because he has the energy of youth and can squeeze 40 hours of day into 24. Seriously, youth is wasted on the young. But he manages. All the while, the tension is growing and the politicking is getting very intense, and it's getting more and more heated. This simmering pot of politics is coming to a boil. Regal is a problem. Very few people truly understand how calculated Regal can be in getting what he wants. That's not to say he's clever. He is still quite moustache twirly. He does have reasons, and if you're prepared to spend the time looking for those reasons, they are there. If they're not, and you're happy for him to be a moustachey twirly villain, well, that's fine too. He has his own agenda, doesn't match anybody else's agenda, and he's quite happy that the pot is bubbling over. The war gets to a point where Verity takes Fitz aside and sort of, what have you got for me regarding the Elderlings? Because we need this help. Fitz has managed to collate some of the stuff that he's got. The Fool has managed to help him quite a lot with this. So they're trying to figure out what the Elderlings are, where the Elderlings are, and what they might ask for in return if they are sought after for help. Because the kingdom it's on the brink, man. A lot is happening. And from here I can't really tell you much more because it becomes very spoilery. Suffice it to say, this bubbling pot continues to bubble, and it does start to boil, and by the end of the book you are sitting on the edge of your seat going, oh my god, is this actually happening? Is he going to get away with this? No. That's okay. Everybody has felt this. Keep going. The pacing of this book is much, much faster than Assassin's Apprentice. It's not high action, it's not high drama, but there's more of both of those things in this book. Quite a lot more. The pacing is fairly steady. It does just kind of ramp up and 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 ramp up. And where this book ends means that I have 2 pieces of advice for you. 1, have Assassin's Quest ready to go. And 2, have lots of tissues, because this is quite an emotional book. Because Fitz is 15, 16. He is dealing with a lot of stuff, and lots goes down. Now, this might not grab you. Some people don't shed a tear until much later in the series. I have been known to cry earlier, just saying. So, I think I have managed to do that without giving away spoilers. Pretty sure. I'm going to hope I did. So, I would like you to like. I would love it if you subscribed. And next time will be obviously in the realm of the Elderlings. Content will be Assassin's Quest. If you are wondering where my next Discworld video will be, it will be on the last 2 Witches books, which are Masquerade and Carpe Jugulum. And I may have something different in mind as well. So keep an eye out. With that, I'm going to love you and leave you. Have a great week.